Moving Forward with Arthritis with Sharon Caddy.
Well, hello everyone again, and welcome back for another episode of Moving Forward with Arthritis. I'm Sharon Caddy. I want to say thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing with everyone. Remember that we are available on all your favorite podcast platforms and YouTube and all the social media. We'll talk more about that later on. I've got a guest I've been really looking forward to who's joining us today. Now, a question: when you get diagnosed with arthritis of any kind, you're talking about whether maybe there are medications, maybe there's surgery, maybe there's therapy. But over the years, and I mean, I've had pretty much all of those things, the medication, the surgery, and the therapy. But I like to say that one of my favorite medicines that helps me live day to day and deal with my conditions is what I eat. So if you've ever thought, does it really make a difference? The answer, of course, is yes. However, there's a lot of confusing information out there. I mean, it's a pet peeve if you've been listening for a few episodes now. Dr. Google doesn't always give you what you need, or you don't know how to interpret it. So today I have invited Kim Arrey, who's joining me. She's a certified dietitian-nutritionist and nutrition coach based in Montreal, specializing in arthritis and anti-inflammatory eating. Also, author of this book, The Complete Arthritis Health Diet Guide and Cookbook. We'll talk a little bit about that coming up. But Kim, welcome to Moving Forward with Arthritis.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Sharon. This is really great that we're getting to do this. I really enjoy talking to you and to other people about this. Fantastic.
So it's interesting learning a little about you in that, like with this podcast, I was inspired to do this because I've been diagnosed more than 20 years. I live with arthritis, and I think sharing information is a great way to improve ourselves and really learn how to manage our own conditions. For you specialize in dealing with people who have various forms of arthritis. And again, this is very personal to you. Can you share a bit of your story?
Yeah, well, my story is a bit personal in terms of for myself and my family, and then also for my clients. So, and for my family, I watched a number of my close relatives, my dad, my aunt, my grandmother become pretty incapacitated because of their arthritis, and saw how that could spiral because now, my knees hurt. Now I can't exercise. Now I can't exercise. This happened and this happened and this happened. And it kind of all goes together. So I got to see that. And then I had an injury that took forever to be diagnosed. And when they finally diagnosed the injury, they also said, oh, by the way, you have arthritis in your shoulder. And it's interesting because my injury is in my left arm, and my left shoulder is where I have arthritis, and I'm left-handed. So yeah, of course, it couldn't possibly be my right hand that just kind of sits there. So I've had to manage this through time. And so that's it's been about, I've had pain since I was about, I'd say it's a good 20 years that I've been managing it. So it's a bit of a pain in the neck. Yes, literally some days.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. So your diagnosis of arthritis, what came first, your career path in nutrition or your diagnosis, or were they kind of at the same time?
So I've always been working in nutrition, but my interest in arthritis came partly from my diagnosis because I could see how when I did different things, I had different outcomes, but also from working with clients who were coming to see me because they had arthritis. And so either because they were, before then it wasn't Dr. Google, it was talking to the neighbors and whatever. But, being told they should be doing this, that, and the other for their arthritis, or getting, suggestions, very strong suggestions from their doctor that if they just miraculously lost, a ton of weight, their arthritis would clear up, or life would be beautiful if they just lost weight. And so they should just,
because that's really, really easy, right? And immediate.
Oh, yeah. So it used to infuriate me. It still infuriates me when I get these poor people coming in and being told they have to do this. So that also fueled my interest because, like, although I do understand the concept of if you have less pressure, especially on your knees and your feet and your ankles, and your hips, because you weigh less, you will have less pain. I do understand that concept, but I wanted to know if there was more to it and if anything that people were eating actually contributed to their arthritis.
Mm-hmm. Now, the word that comes up a lot, and not just for arthritis, but for other things that people live with, is inflammation. Mm-hmm. Inflammation just seems to be such a key word and a key issue. And what we eat is literally directly connected, isn't it?
Yes, what we eat is definitely literally connected. But I think one of the things that I really worry about is most people think it's connected in a way of if we just stop eating something, then the inflammation will go away. And we just have to figure out what that thing is, and then everything will be fine. And we're understanding it's way more complicated than that. And it's much more about the foods we actually choose to eat rather than the ones that we're avoiding. So I think that's really important. And there is a concept now which is called the inflammatory theory of disease, which is that basically all the diseases like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, even depression, Alzheimer's, these are all rooted in inflammation. And if we can just help to manage that inflammation, that will, at the very least, slow the progression of these diseases and possibly even eliminate them.
Yes, exactly. And it's interesting what you were saying earlier, though, where people think that, okay, I do this and the inflammation is going to totally go away. I mean, the actual diseases come with inflammation, but we can exacerbate that by not making good choices, right?
Exactly. I always talk about it as being something like, have you ever been in a car when somebody's driving and they have a foot on the brake pedal and a foot on the gas pedal? And it feels like you're like jogging along like this. And I feel like, we do all these things to get better. We do exercise, we take our medication, but if we're not eating in a way that's going to help manage the inflammation, it's like driving in the car with your gas pedal and your brake pedal all the time. And so it's really important for us to kind of help those things along by doing the best we can to eat foods that are going to help us to lower our levels of inflammation. Work with our medication.
So let's sort of take a dive into this now. So for people who've never really thought much about it, what does anti-inflammatory eating actually kind of look like?
It's actually so what we're looking at when we look at the studies is we're looking at a Mediterranean type diet. The Mediterranean diet is the one that's been most studied, which is a good news and a bad news. Because, we get carried away with that one. But anyways, it's really great because it's easy. When I say it's easy, it's a bit of a change from what some of us are used to eating, but it's still easy in that doesn't demand that you ship in foods from Timbuktu or, it's easy in terms of you can use foods that we have here on a regular basis, easy access. Basically, it's more of a plant-based diet. So you want to be having a lot more plant foods. So when we talk about plant foods, we're talking about vegetables, fruits, whole grains. We're talking about nuts and seeds, and we're talking about things like lentils, chickpeas, kidney beans, that kind of thing that are going to give you some sources of protein. There's in that diet, there's also healthy fats. So things like olives and olive oil and avocado oil, that kind of thing. And flaxseed, flax oil, all the different nuts, all the different seeds. And then we can move on to things like fermented dairy products, eggs. And yes, there's cheese and meat. But in smaller amounts, and they tend to be a lot less processed than what we're looking at. And so I think two of the things, if we look at what we want to avoid on the Mediterranean diet, because there are some things they don't do a lot of there, and one is having a lot of sweets. Don't have a lot of ultra processed foods.
Yes. And I think that goes for everybody. Everybody should be limiting those things. What I've found interesting, and I think this would be apply to everybody, not just me, but when I really several years ago started to really consciously cut out most sweets and definitely refined sugars, because I had an enormous sweet tooth. It was like my favorite menu item, right? And so, I mean, I'm honest about it. It was big for me to actually step back from the sweets at all. And in doing so now, I don't really enjoy a lot of sweet. I actually lost my taste for sugar, which is good.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think it's something that we have to give ourselves a chance to do. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, when we eat something, it's very hard to tell whether it's a habit or whether we really enjoy it. We're in the habit of finishing our meal with a sweet, so we do it. Do we really love that dessert? Well, some of them that come with the restaurant meal are not great, but we eat it anyways because it's part of the dinner, but we eat it because it's there. So I think a lot of times we eat those things because we think we're supposed to, because they're a habit. I think sometimes too, we tend to have had this thing with food, which is either we're being good or we're being bad. And there are foods that are good and there are foods that are bad. And when we're being good, we only eat these foods. And when we're being bad, we only eat these foods. And that also is like, oh, well, I'm not being careful now, so I can eat all the sweets I want. So it's really important to kind of take a step back and look at them. This doesn't mean you don't eat any sweets at all, but I think we want to treat them like we would treat any friend with respect. We want to treat sweets with respect as well. And so we want to really cut back on them. Also be picky on what kind of sweets you're having. So when you're having the sweet, you're picky about which one you're having.
Yeah. Yeah. The other was about, you mentioned fats, and it's funny over the many years, and in you being in the business you're in the type of treatments you do, you've followed it's sometimes what we eat and the diets that are promoted by commercials and media are so trendy. And I mean, there was literally, I'm thinking probably 15, 20 years where, I don't eat any fat. You don't want any fat, but there's fat and there's good fats. And I think that people are starting to come around to the idea that you actually not only should, you need to include healthy fats in your diet, right?
You do. And it's really important for especially people with arthritis to remember that there are some fats, the omega-3 fats, that are really key in helping your body to reduce your levels of inflammation. And one of the issues we have in North America is we have a very skewed ratio of how much omega-3 fats or really healthy fats we have versus how much unhealthy fat we have. The ratio is really off. It's supposed to be at least 1-to-1, and it's not. It's 4-to-1 in favor of the bad guys. So we have to really focus on switching that up. So it's really important to be looking for the healthy sources of fat, things like nuts and seeds, things like fatty fish. Those are really important to be including in your diet, not just, putting a whole bunch of butter on your toast or throwing a ton of oil on whatever it is you're eating.
Mm-hmm. And the other one you mentioned was processed food. I think everybody knows the term processed food, but if we break it down for people who, like, a lot of people hear words and I get it. It's processed food. But what is processed food, and what is it about processed food that actually can have a negative impact on the way our body functions?
Okay, so this is actually something that's come up a lot of discussion in the scientific journals, because what we understood was that while we're doing this research on processed food, we didn't really have a definition. So all the studies were coming up with somewhat different answers because they were actually not using the same criteria for what is a processed food. So the first thing we did is we came up with what we call the NOVA classification, and that divides processed foods into 4 groups. So you start off with the foods that's totally unprocessed. Then you have foods that are things like, okay, it's vegetables, but they cut them up for you. Okay, well, that's not so bad, you know. That's still processed, but it's okay. They cut up the vegetables. Or then you have ingredients, things like salt or oil. So you have to press the olives to get the oil. So it's processed, but it's not very processed, and it's an ingredient. Then they have the next step, something, let's say, like canned tomatoes that are just tomatoes that have been canned, or frozen vegetables that have just been frozen. That's more processed, but it's not considered, that's still considered okay. And then we have what we call the ultra processed foods. And those are the ones that have a lot of different ingredients. They might have emulsifiers in them. They might have preservatives in them. They might have all kinds of things in them. So there's 2 things that we're looking at now with them. One is a lot of those foods contain a lot of extra fat, sugar, salt, calories, things we don't need, and not a lot of nutrients that we do need. So that's one issue that we have just in general across the board. And then the next thing that we're concerned about is that some of these foods seem now, the new research is showing that some of those foods might disrupt our gut microbiota. And our gut microbiota really plays a super important role in helping us to manage inflammation. So now we're starting to look at those foods a little more closely to see what effect they might have, if in fact they do have an effect.
Interesting. A step that we started taking at home in the past couple of years, especially, was getting less foods into our home that come in a package, in a box, in an envelope, and going to, especially, I mean, it can be a little harder in the winter in Canada, but especially in the summer, we go to markets. We're buying, from the farm kind of food. We've been trying to transition as much as possible to food in its actual form and making our own food. And we feel healthier for it, right?
Yeah, it's amazing the difference it makes. However, it can be a big challenge for people with arthritis to do that, right? Because it takes an extra effort to do that. You have to spend more time grocery shopping. You have to find the farmer. You have to do a little bit of effort to do it. And when you already are tired and you already have to run around to treatments and you already have to all kinds of other things that you have to do. And sometimes it's just painful to stand and cook, So, or it's painful to try and cut things, or it's painful. Or you don't have the energy to do a lot of preparation. So from that point of view, we have to find a balance of what we can purchase that may be somewhat prepared, like maybe get somebody to chop your vegetables for you. But by the same token, that you can actually do the cooking. So we want to find that balance. But for sure, yes, the more we can get fresh, the more we can get that has the least amount of processing and cook it ourselves, the better it is.
Excellent. Now I wanted to broach a little onto the topic of, as you mentioned earlier, when we started talking, was diet, like a diet as far as weight loss diet, because I know several people I've spoken to over the years that have gone to their doctor. Many called me because I've had both of my hips replaced. I understand hip replacement. I've had a couple of them saying, I went to the surgeon and the surgeon said they won't do it unless I lose X number of pounds, whatever poundage that was for the person. And they're saying, well, I don't even know where to begin, and I can't do a lot of activity because I'm in so much pain. When someone comes to you and says, I need to really focus on trying to bring my weight down, and you're dealing with someone who's dealing highly emotionally, in a lot of pain, they have a goal. What's that first step from a diet perspective to get them there?
It really depends on the client that I'm talking to. It really does. The first thing I always ask them is, how do you feel about this? What is your view? I then point them to the new statement that says, we don't need to have weight. It should not be criteria for hip and knee replacements. And they're going away from that now, but it has been very popular, and there's still doctors who are still very concerned about it. I also want to focus on what was the lowest weight that person ever had. Because as an adult, if your doctor says, I want you to lose, let's say you weigh 250 pounds, and your doctor says, I want you to get down to 180. Well, if the last time you weighed that was when you were 18 and you're 65 now, I don't think the likelihood of you getting there and staying there is really high. And if that is the case, I'm not too sure what the point is. Is there somewhere in between that we could work with? So what I always focus on with all my clients, regardless of whether they're there for weight loss or not, is let's see what we can do with your diet to make it less inflammatory. For a lot of people, just doing that will help them to lose 10 to 15 to 20 pounds, which we know for a lot of people, that's going to already help them to get where they want to be. So let's focus on that. Then if you still have concerns, if your doctor still has concerns, then we can discuss, should you be taking weight loss medication? Should you be going for weight loss surgery? Should you be trying to do a meal replacement? What can we do to help you to get where you need to be and to stay there? That I think is important, and we need to look at all the options that are available to that person. I think the other thing that I always like to discuss with my clients whenever they're coming to see me for weight loss, though, is we do know that fat cells secrete pro-inflammatory chemicals. So the more you have fat cells in your body, the more you're going to produce pro-inflammatory chemicals, and the more inflammation you're going to have. So the more you're going to have issues. So then what I want to talk about with them as well is, what exercise program are you doing to build muscle mass? Have you consulted a kinesiologist? I want you to build some muscle mass here. It's not only about losing weight, it's about making sure that you have lost some fat, but you've increased your muscle mass. I don't want you to lose a whole bunch of weight and also muscle mass, not that much fat mass, and now you're a weaker person and you've actually got more pressure on your joints because you don't have any muscles holding anything up. Mm-hmm. We went backwards.
Yeah. And that's, I think that can be a tough message for some people to hear, because there's that feeling that, and I've been through a different hips and feet and everything else, and there's times I can't be on the treadmill. I can't go for long walks. I can't do certain things, but there are things you can do. And I think the whole thing is getting that mind shift focused, to what you can do. And building muscle mass doesn't mean you have to be running on a treadmill or doing anything like that. There are alternatives. And I think people have to, while they're looking at the alternatives in what they're eating, also look at the alternatives in getting activity. And it doesn't have to be the standard, what everyone thinks it has to be.
No, exactly. And that's why I always suggest my clients consult with a kinesiologist, because they have the educational background to help clients who have, medical issues actually, and develop programs for them. So I think that's really, really important.
Okay. So I want to take a few minutes to talk about your book, because I have it. And, I wasn't sure. I knew that there would be recipes, which I'm always excited about. If you saw my recipe cabinet, my recipe book cabinet, it's crazy. I love them. It's like an obsession. What I love with this book is that the first literally half of the book goes into the nuts and bolts of what is arthritis, different kinds of arthritis. Tell me what led you to write this book and structure it the way you did, because it's really informative.
So I have so many clients who come in with, like I said, Dr. Google's. Mm-hmm. Or I spoke to my aunt and they said this is a diet I should be following, and also blaming themselves because feeling like, if I would just follow my diet properly, then I would be okay and it's my fault I'm like this. I really wanted to help clients have the information in a simple, easy to read format so that they could then take that guilt and that blame away and kind of make some decisions based on what is actually in the research, what is actually out there. And I also wanted to make it so that you could pick it up and just read a section, and it didn't matter if you read the 20 pages before or the 20 pages after. You just read that page and you got some information that you wanted and you went from there.
Yeah. And it's really informative with everything, including a look like, it's amazing how many people I know that have been diagnosed, but really, depending on who the doctor is and what kind of communication they have, they don't really know what it means visually. And you've got actual pictures of this is what this kind of arthritis looks like. This is what it does. It's such an educational tool to get in our mind. And you start to understand, when I feel that pain, that's why I feel that pain. That's what it looks like. So I think it helps to center our mind on everything. And thumbs up to you on that. That's amazing. Because first thing I thought when I opened the book.
And I worked really, really hard to do that, to make it so that when people would pick it up, they would really be able to, feel like they could see themselves somewhere in there.
Yeah. And it's true. Now, the second half of the book are the recipes. So how did you drill down to what recipes or what kind of recipes that you wanted to include? So people are grabbing this book to learn something and to get good recipes.
So because I looked at the basics of the Mediterranean diet, I wanted to find recipes that would use ingredients that we could have day to day, that we could find easily. Taking into account that we live in Canada, I didn't want to be using too many ingredients that we had to, fly in or, to go to the special grocery store to buy. I wanted to focus on what we could get here easily. And things that varied in ease of preparation based on, oh my goodness, I can just throw everything in the crock pot in the morning and leave it in the slow cooker because I really don't have a lot of energy today, to, oh my goodness, I have all this energy and I'm going to really focus on something very different. And I wanted to use different recipes from different cultures so that everybody could, find something that was really tasty, so that we would understand that just because we have arthritis doesn't mean we have to eat bland food. And also to take advantage, because we know some of the different herbs and spices that we may not be used to eating actually can help us manage our arthritis. And we need to find ways to include them because it's not always fun. Like, nobody would want to, pick up a teaspoon and say, oh, this is good for me. I'm just going to eat a little, bit of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's some learning, but it can be fun because you're learning through what you eat. And the great thing about adjusting your diet to be healthier, and it's a gradual thing, and it's about consistency, not perfection. We all grab stuff we shouldn't once in a while. I think everybody does that. But if someone is listening and thinking, maybe today's the day I'm going to start taking that first step to really taking a longer look at what I eat, and how it affects me, what would be the first steps you would tell someone it would be smart to take?
Wow. again, it depends a little bit about on the person, but I always start by observing what you eat. Really observe. And also try and observe your symptoms. Because that can, are you just in general feeling always, lousy and in pain and just generally, or do you notice, oh, this is worse when I do this? For example, when I eat a lot of foods on the barbecue in the summer, my arthritis is always worse. Okay. When I, at Christmas time, when everybody makes sweets and you go to all the visits and whatever, and so you have a few more desserts, my arthritis tends to be a bit worse. Right? So I think it's important that you recognize those things, because if you recognize those things, then it might be easy then for you to pick, okay, this is what I'm going to work on first. I'm going to focus on those barbecue foods because it really makes it worse. Or I'm going to focus on removing sweets because I noticed I eat them every day, 3 times a day. Oh, maybe I need to cut back a bit. Or maybe I need to switch it up. So if I give you an example, the example I always give is my husband was used to, when we were first married, he was used to his mom making 2 desserts every day, as one for lunch and one for supper. He was spoiled. And he married me, and I come from a Mediterranean background, and our dessert was always fruit. So we nearly got divorced on our second day home because he's expecting this dessert and I'm throwing him an apple and he's going, what the hell is this? What do you want me to do? And I'm like, well, cut it up and eat it. I don't know. And I had to learn how to take the apple and make it into a baked apple. So he was then happy because it had a little bit of sugar and had a little bit of, sauce, and it was, gooey and soft and nutty and delicious. So I was happy because he was having his fruit, and then he was happy because he was having his goodies. So I think that's one of the things we have to learn how to do, is make that bridge between how do I satisfy some of the things I'd like to do versus just, okay, I'm only going to eat fruits now. Because to go from just eating a dessert, like a fancy cake with icing and everything, and cream poured on top of it, by the way. I nearly died when I saw that one. And then going off onto, I'm only going to eat an apple, is maybe too big a gap. And then that makes it impossible to be consistent. So then it becomes, okay, I slipped over to this kind of dessert. Well, now I can tell you that now at work, they bring him plates of fruit because he doesn't eat dessert. So he barely eats dessert anymore. But it was a gradual process. Mm-hmm. It wasn't okay, I'm never going to do this again. It was a gradual process.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the one.
And for anyone that is listening and thinking, this all sounds great, I don't know if I can do it by myself. There are always professionals like yourself who are available wherever you live across this country that you can connect with. And, I've taken on the services of a nutritionist dietitian, and it does help to get you on track.
It really does. And if for no other reason, because a lot of people say, but I know what to eat. I read the book and I know what I'm supposed to do. And I understand that you know what you're supposed to do, but sometimes discussing it with someone helps you to come up with the how. It's not so much about the knowing the what, but how are you going to do this? How are you going to get started and take different steps? Maybe you need some encouragement because sometimes we are our own worst enemy. We're really hard on ourselves. We tend to be. So sometimes you need a dietitian. One of my clients who says to me, Kim, I would give myself a 6 out of 10 on my week, but I know you would probably give me an 8 out of 10. And I go, yeah, exactly. You did this, and this. That was really cool, but you're focusing on this and this, which was a little more difficult for you. So why don't we focus on the really cool stuff? So sometimes you need a person who's outside the square to help you to do that.
It's true. And a little accountability can help, especially in that early stage, because as they say, it takes 30 days of consistency to create a new habit. And basically that's what we're doing, is we're forming some new, healthier habits with our eating and the choices we make. And so that's a great step for people to take. And I want to remind people again, this book is available. I'll have links in the show notes as to where you can get a copy, because it's actually really good. And I want to thank you, Kim, for joining me today and sharing some information and wisdom with the people watching and listening. Thanks again for being a guest on Moving Forward.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to connect with everybody.
My pleasure. And thank you to all of you for once again being here, listening, watching, and learning a little bit more about making your life with arthritis a little bit better. Remember to share with your friends, family, coworkers, neighbors, so that you never know, so many people live with some form of arthritis. And I'm always hoping to get more information out to help people. Again, in today's show notes, you'll find information about Kim and about the importance of nutrition with dealing with your day-to-day living. And remember to follow us on all the social media and, of course, the website movingforwardwitharthritis.com. Until next time, have a great day, eat healthy, and keep on moving forward with arthritis.